Hey, friend.
Hey,
Welcome to another episode.
welcome back. I'm really excited for this one.
All right, tell us what we're talking about today.
So, this episode came out, all of our episodes come out of conversations that we have. And this one feels like a little vulnerable, but
Yeah.
I think like creating visibility is something that we do. So, okay, let's be vulnerable. And I was sharing a thought pattern, which I'm going to share with the audience. So, it's not like a secret. That like a negative thought pattern that I was having over vacation that I hadn't had in a really long time. And expressing how it was like really like getting in the way of me being present. And it made me angry.
Mm.
And you were very kind and supportive as always, but then you sent me something that you were like, I think this is the episode. It's not old thought patterns. It's put some respect on your trauma response.
Yep.
And so can you share a little bit more about how you interpreted that? And then we can share kind of where we are with that.
Yeah, so I saw this from a TikTok creator who we will link down below because it really hit me like a ton of bricks. We often say, give ourselves grace, but okay, what does that really mean, right? We have responses based upon our traumas, either little t or big T, and those responses may not be serving us, right? They came from a place of the need to survive. And so maybe your trauma response because you grew up in a household that felt unstable might be to hoard all of your money, or it might be to actually spend recklessly because that's what you saw and you are replicating that instability. The reality is our brains have created that response as a way to save us. So even if it is not something that serves us, right, because there's not a lion that's following us right now, and many times our brain actually interprets situations as a lot more dangerous than they are. At the time that the trauma response was created, it was for a reason. And so her opening line was, put some respect on your trauma response. You needed it. At one point, you thought it was going to serve you. And even if you don't need it right now, be grateful for it.
So this is so interesting because I think the word trauma response is thrown around a lot. So we can talk about that,
Okay.
right? And be grateful for it. I think some people are going to be like, it didn't serve me then and it's not serving me now. And so there's also this other element that our brains have done things or do things that maybe never served us.
That's true. That's very fair.
But it was how they coped.
It is a coping mechanism. And the fact that our brains are able to do that unconsciously without us even knowing is something I think to be grateful for. It is a survival instinct that has been created in us as a result of evolution.
Right.
And the saying goes, when you know better, you do better. And we can know better. We can make different decisions, but it has to start from a point of, I think, gratitude in order to move on.
So I think we're throwing out a lot of terms, and like I'm really trying hard not to roll my eyes. But like gratitude and like be grateful for a trauma response. Blah, blah. Okay, so I'm just gonna read some stuff that we did a little research
Before I say that, I don't know why you hate Gabby Bernstein so bad.
Okay. I don't. I read all of her books.
All right.
And I took you to a live taping.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So the amygdala is your brain's emotional center. It's responsible for how you react to the good, the bad, and everything in between. When trauma occurs, let's just say it sometimes does its job a little too well. So what can happen is that this part of the brain becomes overly aroused and potentially hypervigilant to danger. For all of us, the amygdala is a sort of protection center and it tries to keep bad things from happening to us. So that's to your point about running from a lion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The hippocampus is the part of your brain that holds on to memory, and it is also tied in with trauma. This is because your brain remembers how you felt when something happened, potentially a traumatic event. When your hippocampus is impacted by trauma, your brain starts to struggle between what's the past, present, and what's a memory and what's real. Okay. And then, so we have the amygdala and we have the hippocampus, and then we have big T trauma and little t trauma. And then we have old patterns die hard.
Just period.
So what are some of like your old patterns that you have put to rest?
Yeah, I actually just did a YouTube video about this, and I talked about my struggles with overconsumption. And I think this is a little T trauma response because I first began to just get out of control with my shopping and my spending when I was going to law school part time and working during the day. And Monday through Friday, my days looked like 6 a.m., probably more like 5 because I had to be to work by 6. I was a teacher and I taught high school. So, very early days in high school. And I got out of class at 9:30 p.m. So that was Monday through Friday. Sundays I spent studying, and the only day I had to do something that felt like it was good for me was on a Saturday. And it felt like some relief from dealing with the little T trauma of being sleep deprived, of being in a pressure cooker, of having to go through the Socratic method of teaching for folks who do not know
That's fucking big T trauma.
of what law school is. And so, in seeking relief, I would run from my life, run from the lion, and I would run to the mall because I knew that felt good. But the ramifications of that is that I built up, number one, a lot of debt and accumulated a lot of shit I didn't need. But I began to yearn for more and more and more and more and more things. And I've had to be gentle with myself and recognize that part of that habit that formed then was me trying to save myself and me looking for reprieve. Now, it wasn't the right thing to do to fill that void, but it was what I knew to do at that time. And so when you know better, you unlearn those habits, or at least you begin the work of doing so. What about you?
That's so interesting. And I didn't know that.
Yeah. I had to like really unpack that recently. Like, where did that come from?
Yeah, I didn't know that story. I mean, I knew that you were in school you were working full time and in school, obviously, but I did not know that that's where that came from. So interesting. Um, so one of the more recent ones that I've like actually acknowledged that is just different is whenever I used to hear an ambulance, like in the so 2 years ago, my dad had a near fatal accident, and for like a year after, whenever I would hear an ambulance, I would feel exactly the same way as
Oh
when I
my
got
gosh.
the call from my mom to get
Oh,
to the hospital.
oh my gosh.
And I would know objectively that my dad wasn't in the ambulance, but I would like have all of those feelings in my body and like memories. And I'm like, oh my God, it may be someone else's dad or someone else's kid. And it was, we live in a city. I mean, there are ambulances all the time.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen anymore. And so it's like a very tangible one where I'm like, this used to really impact me and it doesn't impact me anymore.
What happened? What changed?
I don't know.
Hmm.
It's like the little T trauma went away. Or I was able to kind of, because it was maybe not an ongoing threat, it wasn't an ongoing lion, like it was a traumatic incident that ended
Yeah, it felt situational.
after like many, many months, but it ended. Maybe it was so short lived that I was able to kind of train my brain to understand that we were safe.
Yeah, there was no immediate
There was
danger.
no immediate danger, but that's one of the more recent ones, um, that felt so visceral,
Yeah.
that feels different, which makes me, there's like lots of examples of that. I think another one that has changed is, I have a daughter who overcame a serious mental illness. And when she used to be upset or get sick or share a concern, I would get so upset, not show her, but like internally because I was worried she wouldn't go to school or she wouldn't be okay. And through her treatment, which was also Josh and my treatment, we
Yeah.
like learned, I mean, mostly her work though. She's doing amazing. And so I see her on the other side. So now I can believe that you can get to the other side.
Yeah. Let's talk about treatment because I think treatment is really important when we talk about trauma. And I agree with you about the TikTokification of some of these therapeutic terms. And so thank you for bringing in those definitions and reminding us that a lot of this has to do with us having the privilege of reaching out to and having relationships with experts and professionals. who were able to support us, because I had a serious breakthrough, which I have told you all about on this podcast, through a partial hospitalization program, which is like this intensive therapeutic program that I went through. And I healed things there that I didn't even know I was still holding on to in the way that I was. And it helped me to define myself in a new way completely. I like to say that you go through the pain and oftentimes the trauma alone. But for me, I heal in community because I had been in one on one, like talk therapy for years. But it was something about being in that room with the same people oftentimes for how long was my program, friend? 6, 8 weeks?
Yes.
It was like a summer.
That's the same as my daughter. She was in a partial hospitalization.
Absolutely. And so if you were struggling with things, I just want to plant that flag in the sand now that it's a chance that you may need a more intensive form of treatment.
I would also say, like, I'm sharing kind of specific examples, but what I have come to learn is that healing isn't a process that ends.
No.
So I think because if you've listened to our New Year's episode, we talk about checking things off on Asana and getting the rainbow unicorn.
Yes.
And I think there's some element of that we want with our own well-being.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, I'm good. Check. I'm over this, or I'm over, like, I no longer worry about that, or that doesn't affect me the same way anymore. And maybe it doesn't, but it's still somewhere in you that you're healing from.
Yeah. It's also the commodification that we talked about in that episode as well. Like, just get the shadow work journal from TikTok Shop, dog. You'll be good. What's trauma when you could get an app? Like, so we are going to be in Baltimore Collective Spaces. It is going to be the second Supper Club of Justice. We are partnering with Chef Katina. If folks know her in Baltimore, her food is absolutely delicious. For a multi-course meal, we will have vegetarian options. Mm-hmm. Welcome cock or mocktails, whatever your fancy might be. And just a good time. I don't know, you tell me, friend, but what I took away from our last supper club is that community is so important, and we can build community in real time with new people.
Yes, and we can connect. I think I think there's something that's holding us back.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just lack of opportunity, which I think is part of it. But we can connect in real life with people who we don't know in a way that feels authentic during this phase of our life. It's just not presented to us as frequently.
I like that.
So we have to create it.
Yeah.
Right? And I think particularly now with literally the country on fire, we don't have many opportunities or experiences where people are encouraging us to be visible and to live our life in any way that feels right to us. And so that's what this platform is, an ability to authentically connect and to have some of these hard conversations. Maybe they be political, but maybe they're just about our life.
Which is a political act. And so do not feel like you have to wait for your best friend, your mama, your auntie, your cousin to come into town. Grab a ticket by yourself, friend. Treat yourself.
Yes, and we will do assigned seating. So even if you come with someone and want to sit with them, please put that in your ticket request. Otherwise, Mama Hot Milfy Margo is going to be doing
the seating chart.
And I don't know anyone in the DMV, so I am going to be doing it based on anything I think of.
Exactly.
Maybe even how pretty your name is.
Mm-hmm. You will be leaving with someone, hopefully multiple people, who you will have the opportunity to get to know for this next phase of our big age lives. So make sure you grab your tickets. The link will be in the bio. I want to give another more specific example because I think there's somebody listening and they're like, your lives are good. Like, Margo, your dad made it through. Thank God. I am over my shopping addiction, or at least I can mask it because I'm making more money.
And you bought Berkisha.
And I bought Berkisha. So it's like, y'all bitches ain't got no real problems. But let me just say that we all have been through a lot more than we present as day to day. And so the thing that I really had an aha moment, like a damn near spiritual download about, was my childhood sexual abuse and that trauma, and not realizing that I was holding on to it in the way that I was. And for years, and I didn't go to this PHP with that at the front of my mind, right?
Mm.
And so it is this trauma response that I had held on to for years, which was that I felt really bad about seeking pleasure or experiencing it. And when I would experience it, I immediately felt guilty. And it was such a clear example of the first thought I had after being abused. And for years, that had been just embedded into my mind subconsciously that I don't deserve this. And when I do have this feeling, it is bad. I am dirty. And I didn't have a true freedom from that and that trauma and that trauma response until I went through that program. And now we 10 white toes down. And so
And people call you for tips.
and I'm like, I want to be the thoughtress, the hoe friend. Because I always had that hoe in me. That hoe was in me. And I felt like it had a chance to be unapologetically free.
So you know what's so interesting? We talked about this on the other episode too, and I talk about it in our Substack that's coming out in a couple weeks, or it will have already come out
Make sure you
by this
subscribe.
episode. Make sure you subscribe. Yes, about doing the thing before we're ready to do the thing.
Period.
And it's so interesting that you say that because you're confusing dates.
Am I?
You created the white toenail manifesto.
You're right. You're right.
Before you went to the hospitalization program.
You're right. You're right. So I had already done like the groundwork.
Correct.
To begin to start to free myself.
Correct. And so that's so interesting, right? Like you had gotten part way there, but then it caught up with you or something.
I needed something to free me.
A recent one of mine is, I mean, it's not about sexual abuse, but it's similar in that, one of the things that I feel so strongly about, as do you, is visibility through this phase of our life.
True.
And accepting ourselves, however ourselves are, and finding beauty in that, and self-identity in our minds and our bodies and our pleasure in our changing bodies. We talk about menopause. I've had a double mastectomy. You've had breast cancer, right? We talk about like reclaiming this part of our lives and our bodies as we move through the stages. Okay. And that is something that is very important to me to model for myself. I mean, it's not a fake thing. Like, and I've been doing it.
You believe
right?
It.
Like
yeah.
We've been visible. I've been visible in a way that I've never been before. And felt kind of like nonplussed about it. Like I haven't been like my skinniest at all. I've shared like my body's changed drastically over the last 5 years from being pregnant and having a third kid to having a double mastectomy. And I have felt fairly good and my thing was that over vacation, like I got to vacation and I like could barely put on a bathing suit. Mm. I was like, what is going on? Like, this is so out of left field. I thought I was over this.
Yep.
I thought, like, and I go into this spin where I'm like, am I a fake? Am I not did I not actually feel those things? Do I actually like secretly hate myself? Or I don't believe, or like, and I was talking to my therapist about this when I got back, and I was like, it was just so frustrating to me because I knew objectively, like, I don't want to be like this. This isn't me, but I was feeling it.
Yeah.
And she was saying that it could have been like an example of integration.
Ooh, say more.
That I like have made these shifts in perspective and not actual, like I am living the shifts in perspective in a way that's authentic to me in my real life. But then I go back to an experience that isn't my life where I have been before.
Yeah.
And my brain, without knowing it, goes back to old patterns.
Which is a very fancy clinical way of saying what we've said before, which is that healing is not linear.
Correct. And so she was like, maybe next time if you go on vacation like this in this way within this environment, it won't be a big deal.
Yeah,
It's like you've showed yourself you can do it.
which is important.
I mean, I don't know. Like I might never go on a vacation again, but like
It's like lifting, right? It's a muscle. You showed yourself that you can lift a heavy weight. You put the swimsuit on, I'm assuming, at some
yeah.
point. Yeah. So you showed yourself that you can get past it. And so the next time we want to go skinny dipping in the Atlantic Ocean, you may be the first one to take your top off.
I mean, it depends how many psychedelics I'm taking.
Another great form of healing.
So great form of feeling. No, but I think it is that I I wonder if some of the shame is kind of this idea of like expecting ourselves to be over it.
Talk about this. Yeah. I think there is shame around still holding on to things. I think there is shame about not living this picture perfect lifestyle. Or if you have it, why am I still not happy? So I think there's shame around that as well. And the truth is that if the trauma hasn't been addressed, the trauma response isn't going to be addressed either. We have to get to the root of it. And that's what I think about with this discussion. Like, how do we peel back the layers of the onion?
Yeah, and sometimes trauma response, I don't know if you agree, but like sometimes I think it's when we feel out of control for whatever reason, our brain just goes back to old patterns.
Mhm.
Right? So maybe it's like a new environment or a new social situation or a new professional situation or I don't know, like you're in a new community
Yeah.
and it feels uncomfortable or it feels new. And your brain is like, all this feels uncomfortable and new. What feels not intentionally, but like, where did my brain used to go?
Yeah, what can I do that makes
Right.
me feel like I'm in control?
Which is just a farce anyway, obviously, but like,
Whole time. Whole time, which is why we can't believe everything that we think, right? Our brains will get so far ahead of us.
right.
And we have to slow things down. Outside of we talked about therapy. We've talked about the partial hospitalization programs, which is kind of more of an intensive form of therapy that tends to be done in group settings.
I also think that
What else has
sounds a
been
little bit
helpful?
scarier than maybe it is. Partial hospitalization, at least from my perspective, is you're still home.
Thank you for pointing that out. I don't know why they call it that.
It's
Sometimes
a
it's called something different.
I know it's sometimes called something different, but it's an intensive at home program. So you're either going into an office, you were doing it in deep COVID, so you were mostly remote. Same with my daughter. It was hybrid.
Mhm.
Um, but it's intense in that it's daily.
It's daily in that it was created, I think it's called PHP because it was created to be something that's in between individual therapy that you may do weekly and actually checking yourself into a facility or that decision, unfortunately being made for
For
you.
you.
And so it's often used as a step down from some of those facilities or a step up from individual therapy. So they call it partial hospitalization, maybe because it's at a hospital. I'm not sure. Mine was at a literal
Same.
hospital. And it was once again one of the best decisions of my life, a tremendous privilege as a solopreneur that number one, I had insurance, but also I could take time between 9 and 12, 4 days a week to even go to this program. Some people don't have that luxury. What else could be helpful?
So, it's so interesting we're having this conversation because I had a similar conversation with a friend who is a therapist, and she was saying that again, this is a privilege, but it just begs the question of kind of where we put our energy. She was saying that she has a number of patients who have serious mental illness diagnoses that in previous years have spent a period of each year in a hospitalized.
Okay.
So like in and out of hospital settings, they're very sick. And that for some folks now, instead of sending so McLean is one of kind of the preeminent mental health hospitals in Massachusetts. So
Okay.
instead of sending them to McLean, she was being a little flippant, but it's a good conversation. She recommends they go to Kripalu. What Kripalu is like a yoga retreat center
Oh,
in Western Mass.
okay.
And she was saying like she recommends for some of her patients to just schedule 3 times a year to get out of town and into the woods and
That's
into
dope, actually. That's dope.
a mindful retreat setting
Yeah.
as a way to stave off being hospitalized.
Okay.
And again, like everyone's care is individualized. No one, like going to a yoga center is not the same as being hospitalized when you're really sick. But her point was that we have a system that only treats people
When they're super, super sick.
when they're really sick.
Yep.
And we have a system that treats people who get preventative care, whatever that looks like for you, as a splurge.
Yes.
As opposed to a necessary preventative measure to stave off something worse.
Oh, now, so we're entering a conversation that we definitely need to have here, and it's about how everything around us actually disincentivizes healing in this way. Absolutely.
Let's say more about that.
Well, I'm saying that if you are really trying to get to the bottom of like your trauma responses, addressing your trauma, your childhood trauma, and healing, and you have a 9-to-5 job and you have children, how are you going to make time for that? If you don't have the resources, the health insurance, you are working a job that pays barely above minimum wage, barely a living wage position. Where are your kids going to go? Who's doing aftercare? How am I getting there? Transportation issues. This is work that we have created as a society that relates to a lack of care about people writ large.
Particularly poor people.
Particularly poor people. And so healing should not be something that only wealthy people get to fucking do.
Say that louder.
Especially when we think about what we're healing from and how wealth and privilege plays a role in it.
Mm.
So the idea that I have to go to find ways to do a GoFundMe to go to a healing retreat just seems completely out of reach for people.
Yeah. And you also think about other countries, right? I mean, no country has it perfect, but you
Of
think
course.
about like Korea, for example. I read that in Korea, when you have a baby, you automatically get 30 days of like a postpartum center that's like not a spa, but like they feed you and help you with the baby
Yep.
and take care, like bathe you and help you with nursing. In France, I mean, speaking of postpartum, everyone gets a postpartum doula that checks in, helps with cleaning your home and
That's
caring for the
wild.
baby. In Canada, you get massages are covered as part of national health insurance, massages and acupuncture.
Wow.
And so you think about what does it take to stay healthy, and these things that in American society are really only privilege is that wealthy people have access to and are also considered extra
Yes. And not necessities.
and not necessity. So even if you are wealthy and engaged, sometimes there's a side eye that goes along with it.
I agree.
And then you think about like how many really sick people we have in this country. I'm not saying I really don't want people to misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not saying a massage is going to cure mental illness.
Oh, no, of course.
But
of
I'm
course.
saying that caring for yourself is multifaceted and we shouldn't think of it as extra.
At all. But because it is in this country, I immediately thought about Audre Lorde's words where she said something to the effect that caring for myself is not an indulgence. It is an act of warfare. It's like an act of resistance for many populations in this country because we are first saying that we are worthy of it. We have to believe, because nothing actually tells us this, that we can be healthy and we can be whole. And it's not a privilege, it is my birthright because I am breathing that I can move past the things that are weighing me down.
Absolutely. And we've talked about this before. There's like a version of us who sometimes do the things but feel bad about doing the things.
Yeah.
And that also isn't very helpful.
Mm-mm. Not at all.
I think we talked about this too, Tashira, about how taking care of ourselves has changed over time.
Yeah.
And how that's actually a strength, understanding what those changes are and not a weakness.
Yeah.
And so how has your understanding of your past or your trauma informed how you take care of yourself in the present?
Oh, I like that. So I think a couple things on a light note, a lighter note, when I talk about the shopaholism and the addiction that I experienced in my early 20s to like mid 30s, I would say I started to create content around the person that I wanted to be, which was to create this capsule wardrobe, to shop intentionally, to consume mindfully. And I created a lot of resources around it, not just to help other people, but to also help me. I think the work that we do, we're doing it to save ourselves selfishly
So I read something that we are who we needed
when we were young.
when we were young.
Hmm.
And I hadn't really thought about that. And then I was like, oh, yeah, what if I
That's really dope,
what if you had
someone who I hope people see me as someone who can be stylish,
Auntie Milfy, sexy,
hot toddy
hot toddy
mommy,
mommy,
hot toddy white toenail mommy, goddamn.
Auntie Milfy, booby,
Yeah, but
visible,
yeah, but and
unapologetic.
welcomes a level of softness and luxury in my life, but it does not define me. And I think that was the message that I was missing. I thought it was about what I put on myself, not what I put in myself. It needed to be in me, not on me. And that is what I hope that I model and what I try to do to tamper down the trauma response
Mm.
because it's right around the corner every time,
Mm-hmm.
as you just
I also imagine
described.
it's hard because you are now a professional in the fashion space.
In the fashion space, yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
consumption is part of your job.
For sure. But you know what I appreciated? That last year, Essence called me a de-influencer.
Yeah, I love
You
that.
remember that? And so that that will always be my claim to fame. Like if I got a blue check beside my name, it's because Essence knows who I am and because they call me a de-influencer. And so what I try to model is a way to do this job and to have a platform that feels like I'm doing it with integrity. Because I think that we all can.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a punishment, right? So you don't have to like punish yourself into not consuming anything.
Exactly.
I've seen a lot of no shop this or no, no consume this, which if that's what works for individuals, great. But I think it's, again, we have always said, stay curious and how are you intentional through the changes?
I think that's the key.
And I think the thing that I am working on is like my brain, when I think about planning or planning for protection or planning for challenge, makes me feel like I'm lame, like I'm basic, like I need so much support. Like, why can't you just go with the flow? And kind of moving my brain into a place of this is how I take care of myself so I can be able to show up in these different spaces. And
Yes.
what I needed 10 years ago is not what I necessarily need now, but I still might need some of that.
And claiming it unapologetically. I think that's key. Yeah. I think in other ways, so as I heal the big T trauma, I think that I created a white toenail season manifesto. And while that was definitely geared towards my hetero counterparts, what it made me, which you were not one of, as we discussed in the previous episode.
No, I've taken some of your manifestos to heart.
No, I mean you were not my hetero counterpart because you're a lesbian, Margo.
Oh, right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. How did you forget that?
I got confused.
It still made me do something that I would never have done 10 years ago, which was talk about sex publicly. Which was like explore my own pleasure in a real way, which was troll you about my love for anal. I wouldn't have done that 10 years ago. And so I have welcomed that as part of my feminism and my advocacy.
Mhm.
And that's made me feel really good.
Yeah.
Because again, that trauma response too is right around the fucking corner.
Of course. And the message, that message we've all gotten, right? As
Yeah.
as female bodied people, right?
Yeah.
That you shouldn't seek pleasure, that you should enjoy it, but only a little bit, and you shouldn't seek it, but maybe like be available, but only available in certain ways.
Mhm.
And you shouldn't really want it, but like you should be open to it.
You shouldn't be too good at it,
But you should be good enough.
Mhm.
And like your body might go through all of these crazy fucking transitions and nothing should change. Just like doesn't make any sense.
None.
Right. And so shedding light on that is an act of advocacy because we're countering the narrative that's bogus.
Yeah, 100%. And it's something that, like you said, so many of us have gone through those forms of trauma. And I'm
Totally.
not saying necessarily sexual abuse, but
Oh, well, I imagine many
to
people
be
have.
female bodied in this world, yeah, it
Well,
has not been a
we
safe
know.
thing.
I mean, the data is clear. It's 1 in 4, at least 1 in 4, and most of that's unreported.
Yep.
So,
100%.
and I believe the number is way higher than that because I think our generation didn't fully acknowledge coercive sexual behavior as sexual abuse.
That's such a good point.
And we didn't have the language.
In order to be able
I
to
also
truly
don't think
define
men had
it.
the language.
That's true as well.
Right. So, I mean, we were told like, say no, but, but is it no?
Blurred lines.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Not the song.
Not the song, because that's problematic. That's what I mean. That he
Right.
made light of something that is actually very serious.
Right. So I think it's also kind of acknowledging that we can change and we can ask for things that we need to feel good. So, what are some of the things when you hear that kind of like voice percolating
Start to
you
show
do
up.
for yourself? Because I think people look up, want to know.
Yeah. So I'll tell you, when I get like a really heavy impulse to spend, my therapist once told me, when you feel that way, it's because you have a spiritual deficit.
I've heard that. That's a little drastic.
Yeah, but I don't think so, friend. That's because you don't believe in Gabby. I don't believe so. I am a very spiritual person, and I think that there's a connection that I'm missing, that I'm seeking, right? My brain is literally telling me that it's almost like a vitamin deficiency.
Mm.
Like your body tells you need something. Like I used to have pica, right? My body was telling me I needed iron. So I would eat ice constantly. My brain is telling me it needs like a quick jolt of something. Oh, so I need to go buy something. Now, as someone who loves fashion and art, there are moments where I just covet and want the thing because I think it's beautiful. But there are other moments where the urge is the strongest. It's because I'm seeking joy and pleasure. And so the question is, how can I find that in ways that are a lot more healthy? And
Mm.
it's funny because Dr. Sharon, who we talk about on this podcast, Dr. Sharon McDaniel, she was joking one day and she said, the next time I want to buy something, I'm gonna go get on my Peloton. Like I'm seeking something, and maybe I need to just exercise and feel a rush of endorphins there instead of spending money.
So I think I've told you this. So yesterday Tashira made a comment about how frugal I am, and I thought it was a compliment. She was making it as a statement about my cheapness. Either way, I think I've told you this about. I do love shop. I love fashion. But I'm not a shopper.
Yeah.
In the traditional way. I buy a lot of stuff secondhand. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But I've told you, I think, my thing about shopping when I get that really strong urge.
Mm-mm.
Like sometimes I get that strong urge of just like, I need something right now.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, do I actually need it? Or is this just a response to feeling out of control? Is that I don't let myself purchase it for 48 hours.
That's a good tip. That's very practical, 100%.
So I do let myself buy it if I'm still thinking about it, or I'm still kind of like, oh, I think I'll use that, or this is how I'd incorporate it into my life or my wellness, or
Yeah.
but in another episode that we're gonna film later, I'm gonna talk about some specific examples of that. But it's something that has allowed me because the times where I have purchased kind of in that like
Impulse.
I always regret it.
And nobody has time for that. We at a big age. I want to buy things that I love and love what I buy. And so that's something else that kind of drives me to move past that trauma response, friend. is that I don't have time, literally or figuratively, to feel guilty about how I spend my money. I can consume consciously, quite honestly. And so I like the 48-hour rule. Also, again,
That's just what works for
obviously,
me, but, like
yeah, just having a capsule wardrobe, I think in general has slowed down my consumption. And I also, another rule that I share often, and I got this from Janae Naylor, who's also a content creator, is to think about how you can wear the thing three ways.
Oh, I like that.
And that's helpful too, because a lot of us who are struggling similarly are shopping online and on social media, especially. And we're just checking out because the thing is cute. We're not slowing down and thinking about how it relates to us in our day to day
I
lives.
like that. So one thing that I do when I start having negative thoughts is there are three things that I focus on immediately. One, this isn't going to surprise anyone. What are they?
Three things that you focus on when you start feeling negative. Your sleep.
One,
um, Something about your nutrition. So like your bone broth, your electrolytes, your mini supplement. This bitch takes at least 155 supplements a day. And the third thing, movement or your kids?
oh, actually, it's four.
Okay. What's
Well,
three?
it's actually five.
Well, goddamn it, what's the other ones, girl?
Okay, so sleep, nutrition, hydration, that sort of thing.
Hydration, yeah.
Um, I, I, I stopped drinking.
Yeah.
So I really don't drink that much anymore, but like over the holidays, I'd have a glass of wine here or there, and I was noticing I was feeling really sad or self-critical, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, maybe my body's just more sensitive to alcohol now because I don't drink anymore."
That's real.
And the serotonin, like it's literally the chemicals in my brain.
Yeah.
So I immediately cut out alcohol. Um, and I try to move consciously, not like in a painful way, but
Yeah.
like get out, get outside, get some sunlight, and spend time with people I love.
Yeah.
Because all of those things make me return to myself.
Mm.
Like I feel it's like, oh right, I can move my body, or I can feel strong, or I am a good friend, I am a good mom, I am a good partner. And like all of it, like my world, I have a very black and white thinking. Like I'm like everything's good or everything's not good.
Yeah.
And so it helps me like reclaim like, oh no, stuff isn't all falling apart. It's okay.
I love this. I love this returning to myself. So I would encourage everyone to think about that. What's your list of returning to yourself? And obviously, we're not trying to be woo woo here and
No, we
think that
are.
you can, well, I mean, to think that you can like journal your way out of a mental
No,
health issue,
no.
because
But I think,
that's not true.
but I think it's like we should all have these things in our toolbox
I love
to
that.
immediately pull out
I love that.
to see if they work. I mean, they might not all work.
Yeah.
But what are the things you can do as opposed to doing the things that are going to cause more harm?
That are not serving you.
Right. Like I have a
yeah.
friend who, whenever she's feeling down, immediately gets in the bath. Like an Epsom salt bath is her happy place.
I'm gonna try that. That actually sounds
Right.
divine.
And so whenever she's feeling sick, whenever she's feeling sad, when she's feeling stressed, and it's her cocoon.
Oh, I love that.
And I think that's such a beautiful thing, right? Because it's one of her tools.
Yeah. And it's a healthy tool. It's not.
And not all tools have to be healthy, by the way.
You think so? I mean, I don't think I should smoke crack.
I mean, no, but like, would you consider like having a drink with friends a tool if drinking? I don't want to like pathologize all fun behavior.
Yeah, no, that's real. That's real. No, I agree with that. Yeah, because
THC?
I'll light up a J and have a cocktail in a second. Yeah.
That could be harmful for some people, but it could be helpful for others.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah,
Staying up late could be really harmful for me, but helpful for you. Just saying. Although I did stay up till midnight.
Friend, if you bring up that example one more fucking time, and the fact that you remember it lets me know how rare it happens.
My kids clapped. New Year's Day, 12:01, mommy.
It was so funny because last night, I think one of your older kids was like, okay, I'm going to bed. I'm going to hug you now because you're going to be asleep. When I come back, it was 7 o'clock.
You're being dramatic.
They were like, "Good night, mommy. I love you." 7:05.
No, it wasn't. It was 8:05. But I think the toolbox is a really cool visual.
Oh yeah. Okay, I like this. I remember one time I taught like a bit of a self-care workshop and I told people to create an actual like physical box of things that made them feel good when they were down. But I like the idea of a virtual box that you can pull from, or like a visual, like an image in your mind that you can actually pull from. I'm gonna actually write this down in my journal on the airport.
Okay, the other thing, I know we're getting close to the end, but the other thing that I really want to do this year, if anyone wants to do it with me, and I think I might have shared it with you, but I don't know, is I saw this activity where you have a jar, whatever, and you just throughout the year write down on little slips of paper beautiful things that have happened.
Okay.
So like it could be like a beautiful conversation or a book you've read or a trip you took or a professional achievement or an academic achievement. And then at the end of the year, you take them all out.
I love it.
Are you making fun of me?
No. I was. Why do you always think I'm making fun of you, Margo? I was thinking
That's
about
a trauma response, I get.
Right. I was thinking about where do we get this jar from? Because we should do it and we need something really beautiful.
Oh, I can find something like that.
Okay. Well, yeah. Send it to me, but not from Amazon. I'm on Amazon no buy.
Right. I know.
Thank you.
So I do think sometimes we forget those tools when we're struggling. I know I do.
100%. 100%. And that again is our brain's natural response, because our brain says, "Oh, bitch, I know what you need. You need this thing. You need to self-isolate. You need some drugs. You need some alcohol. You need this thing that actually does not serve you." And so you have to break yourself free of that pattern.
Or like the only way you're working hard is if you suffer. I mean, we have these messages that are imprinted.
Yeah.
We don't know, love is pain or whatever it is. Like relationships are hard. And these are messages that we have for whatever reasons, but they're just messages. We can recreate those realities for ourselves.
We are not, as you often say, passive victims of our own lives.
That part. So, wow, I feel really inspired by this episode.
Me too. I was just thinking, like, I'm having so much fun talking about trauma and pain with you. Oh, yeah. It gets me going.
So I guess let's end the episode with a thanks to our sponsor, Purity Coffee. No mycotoxins or mold. We're using the sachets. This is my favorite. This is the dark roast. It's really, really great. It has caffeine, but it doesn't make you jittery. You can use our code JUSTICE20 for 20% off your first order. But also, I would recommend getting on the monthly subscription packages because you obviously can tweak them whenever you want, but there are discounts associated with those as well. Yeah. So find the link either in our bio or use JUSTICE20 at checkout.
Thank you, Purity. And the coffee is delicious. Thanks for listening to Justice. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to learn more about our podcast, be sure to check us out on our website at justicepodcast.com. You can also reach out to us there if you want to be featured on the show or if you have a business or a product that you think would be a good fit for our audience. Thanks again for listening.